llamando Messi. We'll start in 2 minutes, please. Take your seats. Distinguished delegates, I would like to call the meeting to order. I invite delegates to take their seats. Distinguished delegates, we have reached the final day of our third session here in Nairobi. We will begin today with agenda item 4, where we will take stock of the reports from the contact groups and the recommendation for the way forward. Then we will take up agenda item 2, we will then take agenda item 2 on the election of officers, followed by agenda item 3D on the dates and venue of subsequent sessions. Then item 3 on the provisional agenda of the fourth session. Item 5 on other matters, Item 6 on the adoption of the report of the session, and finally, item 7 on the closing of the session. Distinguished delegates, the committee will now resume its consideration of agenda item 4, entitled Preparation of an International Legally Binding Instrument on Plastic Pollution, including in the marine environment. I note that we have made some good progress under this agenda item during the week. I have been in close coordination with the co-facilitators and the Bureau to ensure that the contact groups could advance as much as possible in the work they have been mandated to do. Once more, I would like to commend delegates and in particular our co-facilitators for your hard work. Distinguished delegates, let me outline the approach for our consideration of agenda item 4 today. First, we will invite the co-facilitators of the contact groups under this item to present the report. I would like us to first hear all three reports before I open the floor for delegations to flag any significant issues you would like to highlight with regards to the reports. I would like to remind delegates that these reports will be annexed to the final report of the session, as we have done for the report of our second session. Second, I will invite the committee to consider the way forward on our work based on the recommendations of the contact groups. We will now begin reporting back from the co-facilitators on the three contact groups. Let us start with a short report from the co-facilitators of Contact Group 1, Ms. Gwen Cisior of Palau and Mr. Axel Borschmann of Germany. Ms. Cisior and Mr. Borschmann, you have the floor from the seat of Palau.
Thank you, Chair. And Ali Wiltutao, good morning, distinguished delegates and observers. The group met for 10 sessions from 14 to 18 November and started with interventions on objective under Part 1 and the 13 elements under Part 2 of the Zero Draft. The interventions focused on concepts, preferences of options, and proposals of new text. Delegations were invited to send written submissions to the Secretariat for compilation. The Secretariat then compiled the written submissions and posted the compilation of the revised Zero Draft text in batches. The first round of discussions was concluded on Thursday, 16 November at 10 p.m. The second round of discussion started from 11 a.m. on Friday, 17 November, with a review of the compilation text uploaded in batches. Members were then invited to validate the compiled text and bring to the attention of the co-facilitators and the Secretariat any missing or incorrect text proposals. The co-facilitators prepared, in the meantime, possible mergers for members' proposals, which the group discussed on Friday, 17 November and 18th of November. The outcomes of Contact Group 1 is uploaded on the INC-3 website under Contact Group 1 in session documents. These outcomes include the co-facilitators' full compilation of the revised Zero Draft. This is the version on November 18. Updated co-facilitators' full compilation of the revised Zero Draft text. This is the version on November 19. The co-facilitators' compilation of revised Zero Draft text after the first round of discussions, uploaded after the second round of discussions, and then the possible mergers for the members' proposal was also uploaded. Overall, members had rich and constructive discussions. Varied views were expressed on the different options of the Zero Draft, and in some elements, new proposals, including null options, were added. Specifically in Part 1 on objective, there were converging views that the objective should include ending plastic pollution, the protection of human health and the environment, including in the marine environment from plastic pollution, with many members pointing out to UNEA 5/14 as a basis. There were some agreements that the objective should be broad, with some emphasizing it needed to be concise, short, and constructive. Different views were expressed on whether to put the primary focus on ending pollution or on protecting human health and the environment, including the marine environment. Members called for inclusion of various elements, including sustainable development and reference to other aquatic systems. Regarding Part 2 on primary plastic polymers, many members were in favor of provisions to prevent and mitigate the potential adverse impacts on human health or the environment from the production of primary plastic polymers, while some preferred a no option for the element and disagreed with the inclusion of polymers or primary polymers across the instrument. Members raised the need to take into account national circumstances of developing countries, availability of adequate alternates or substitutes, the special circumstances of SIDS, social, economic, and cultural impacts of measures, science-based measures, common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. With regards to chemicals and polymers of concern, while there were broad support for measures on the use of chemicals, some members objected to the inclusion of this item in the future instrument. Duplication with existing MBAs should be avoided. Some support was expressed on the need for science-based, taking into account indigenous knowledge and supported by a technical subsidiary body, risk-based, hazardous-based approaches, and safe and non-toxic circularity. Some cautioned against the technical barriers that could disrupt trade. Attention was also paid to vulnerable groups, including waste pickers, women, and youth who are at the most risk. Possible mergers with other elements were also proposed. Regarding problematic and avoidable plastics, various views were expressed in the options of the zero draft. A group of members expressed support for a no option. Exemptions for essential uses, impacts of the provisions on vulnerable populations and workers were considered important. Some members requested consideration of national circumstances, means of implementation, development of a list of criteria or list of products, alternatives, traditional knowledge, technological availability, feasibility and accessibility, and the need to avoid harmful alternatives or substitutions. There was general support for addressing microplastics, with some further work to be undertaken in that regard. In regards to exemptions available to a party upon request, some members have expressed openness to discuss this element further, with others emphasizing the need to wait for the conclusion on substantive discussions on other matters. Views were expressed on the procedure and expiration periods. With product design, composition, and performance, there was broad recognition that this element is important. A number of members supported option 1 with global criterion targets. Other members supported nationally determined measures, taking into account national circumstances set out in option 2. A combination of provisions from the two options were also supported. Some members objected to the reduction of primary plastic polymers and measures should be taken to be contingent on availability of technical, social, and economic feasible alternatives and substitutes based on life cycle assessments. A proposal for a sector and productive specific approach received some support. The waste hierarchy and the 3R principles were stressed by some. Some members discussed whether bio-based alternatives should be included or not. With regards to non-plastic substitutes, there was broad support for this element, with some suggesting that this issue would be better addressed together with others, such as alternative plastics and plastic products. A science-based approach, full life cycle approach, cooperation and mechanism, schemes to encourage sustainable solutions, national circumstances were considered important by some members. Careful consideration of bio-based alternatives and promoting development of substitutes by academia and industry were called for. For extended producer responsibility, many members stated that EPR is crucial and there is a broad support for the polluter pays principle, with some recalling CBDR. Some members preferred no specific provisions on EPR, considering it is a tool for implementation. Attention was also drawn to the sovereign right of each country, consideration of national capabilities, diverse types of EPR, the link to just transition, and the role of waste pickers and possibility of a sectoral approach. I'd like to hand the floor over to my co-facilitator to complete our report.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gwen. And on emissions and releases of plastics throughout its life cycle, many members expressed support for this element. So some called for changes in the scope of the provisions and pointed to issues that could be more appropriately addressed under this and other provisions. The challenge of tackling unintentional emissions and releases of microplastics was highlighted, with, again, a sectoral approach in that regard was also proposed here. Some members ask for main sources of emissions, or rather releases, and pathways to be identified. Applying best available technique and best available environmental practices and promoting technological innovation were also considered important. On waste management, there was general support for waste management of plastic waste. Repeated mention was made of the importance of consistency and avoiding duplication with existing international instruments and mechanisms such as the Basel Convention and under IMO and FAO. It was also important to take into account national circumstances and varying capacities for plastic waste management, for which financing and technology transfer would be needed to be considered. The importance of just transition was also highlighted in that regard. I will come to that later. Proposals for taking a sectoral approach and gradual implementation of provisions were made, and several members and observers being supported by those who stressed the need for the instrument to address fishing gear throughout its life cycle and existing pollution from such, with also proposals for alternative placements of these provisions, while others called for their deletion. On trade in listed chemicals and polymers and products and in plastic waste, some members supported the provisions, highlighting the importance of promoting transparency in trade. Some members expressed reservations about or called for the deletion of these provisions from the instruments, or were opposed to restrictions on trade or any conflict with WTO rules. Some as well indicated that provisions should apply to chemicals only. Many members asked to avoid duplication with the Basel Convention that adequately covers the transboundary movement of plastic waste. The special circumstances of SIDS, including limited plastic waste recycling capacity, should be taken into account. On existing plastic pollution, including the marine environment, there was general support on the importance of provisions to address existing plastic pollution in diverse ecosystems. Some members argued that stronger provisions were necessary for the instrument to be effective, and on the need to build on existing instruments such as MARPOL, local and traditional knowledge, and indigenous knowledge. Measures on assessing the current state of plastic pollution, including at the national level, and monitoring in the environment were proposed. The need to share information on relevant technologies and apply common approach, collect data, was highlighted. Also, there were divergent views on the measures to be applied beyond national jurisdiction. On just transition, this element was considered crucial by many members, with special consideration given to indigenous peoples, vulnerable groups, women, youth, and the recognition of importance of integration of waste pickers and workers. Some members made explicit reference to the inclusion of indigenous peoples in text. In addition, several members called to refer the term waste pickers, which must be defined and also included more strongly in the provision. One member referred to a clear link to the means of implementation for justice and another to the reduction of inequality. The measures should be then included in the national plans. Last, on the substantive items on transparency and tracking, monitoring and labeling, many supported this element and stressed the importance of promoting transparency and global harmonized labeling and information disclosure to make enabled and informed decision, while ensuring complementarity with existing efforts such as the Global Chemicals Framework. Reporting obligations were stressed. There was also some support for the disclosure of chemicals composition, inclusion of provisions of exporters, and universal obligations for producers. Some opposed covering primarily plastic polymers under this provision, and it was also pointed out that no trade barriers should be created by this provision. Last but not least, I would like to focus on what has been proposed for intersessional work, running briefly through the list. This is also the list that has been provided to the Contact Group 3 from our side. So there was mentioning of common targets, of global targets and timeline for managing and or reducing the global plastic production and supply of primary plastic polymers, including baselines, level of sustainable consumption and impacts thereof on GDP. We had a mentioning of criteria for identifying chemicals and polymers of concern and a list of such chemicals and polymers, criteria for problematic and avoidable plastics, short-lived and single-use plastic products, impacts of bans, and a list of such products, as well as on exemptions and the minimum sustainable design and performance criteria, including circularity criteria. Minimum reduction, reuse and refill, and repair targets, health and environmental impacts of micro and nanoplastics, sources and of emissions and releases, methodologies for monitoring existing plastic pollution. Establishment of minimum reduction, reuse and refill targets, that's double, I'm afraid, and the sectoral approaches which have been mentioned quite a lot of times in the document for. Life cycle management of fishing gear, modalities of EPR schemes and systems, financial needs to meet those provisions we have been talking about, as well as trade issues. Then we had the call, and this is not an exhaustive list, for some definitions. We'll highlight some of those, which were the primarily plastic polymers, bio and fossil fuel-based, chemicals and polymers of concern, problematic and avoidable plastic products, including short-lived and single-use plastic products, microplastics, alternative plastic products, and some on practices like open dumping, just transition, and such terms like producer. On the way forward, with the possible mergers which have been mentioned by my distinguished co-facilitators, the group considered that the merged text should serve as a starting point for further work. With that, I would also like to express our sincere gratitude to the member of this committees and to the observer that they have supported us so much in this work and have threaded along the path with us and made this tremendous effort to finalize the work. I am quite confident, as I haven't checked so far, but there should now be all of the work being reflected on the homepage, and with that I would extend a special thanks to the lone person who has been trying to get us all updated on the latest version. That is a hard task with a lot of requests for this person, and I think we cannot thank this person enough. In addition, also with extending the gratitude to the secretariats, to all the colleagues who have supported us as co-facilitators. It was a great pleasure to do that with you, and we would love to continue working with you in the future. So thank you very much, and handing back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Cisior and Ms. Borsham, for your report and work. We will now hear a short report from the co-facilitators of Contact Group 2, Ms. Kate Lynch of Australia and Mr. Oliver Boashi of Ghana. Ms. Lynch and Mr. Boashi, you have the floor from the seat of Australia.
Mr. Chair, fellow committee members, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to present a summary report on discussions that have taken place in Contact Group 2 during this third session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee for Plastics Pollution. On behalf of my co-facilitator and myself, I wish to express our deepest gratitude to you and members of the committee for granting us the opportunity to serve as co-facilitators at INC-3 here in Nairobi. I'd like to inform members that a copy of our full co-facilitators report has been uploaded this morning on the INC webpage for the information of all members. Therefore, Chair, with your permission, I propose to now provide a summary of that report. Mr. Chair, when Contact Group 2 was established, it was tasked to review Part 3 and Part 4 of the annex to the Zero Draft document. The sections in Part 3 were financing, capacity building, technical assistance, and technology transfer. And the sections in Part 4 were national plans, implementation and compliance, reporting on progress, periodic assessment and monitoring of progress of implementation, international cooperation, information exchange, awareness raising, education and research, and stakeholder engagement. The group was mandated to review the Zero Draft and to solicit input from members to be incorporated in a revised version of the Zero Draft, to solicit inputs on the possible relevant intersectional work, if any, and to communicate them to Contact Group 3 for further elaboration, and also to provide a summary report to this plenary. Contact Group 2 has been privileged to hold 6 meetings from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Tuesday, November 14, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Wednesday, November 15, from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Wednesday, November 15, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Friday, November 17, from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Friday, November 17, and from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturday, November 18. We used the initial meetings to hear views from members in order to identify the level of support for the provisions of the Zero Draft, to identify areas where members would like to see amendments to or removal of provisions in the Zero Draft text, and to learn from members the rationales for alternative or additional text proposals. We also used the opportunity to hear very constructive interventions from observers. Through this process, most delegates expressed the view that while the Zero Draft established a strong basis for the review process, there were considerable gaps between what was contained in the Zero Draft and what was needed to initiate the process of developing a revised version ready for negotiations at INC-4. This process helped all of us to better understand the perspectives and priorities of members, which was to ensure that we carefully identify the gaps in all the sections and to make sure that we solicit input from members to fill those gaps. In line with our mandate from the plenary, We have now developed compilation text for all elements which fall within Part 3 and Part 4 of the Zero Draft. This compilation incorporates all written text suggestions and suggestions captured during contact group discussions to the best of our ability. We have reviewed the compilation text within the contact group to validate its completeness. Following our review of the compilation text, the members of Contact Group 2 also tasked us as co-facilitators to suggest streamlining of the compilation where possible. Based upon the discussions in our contact group, we have identified instances where there was scope to remove duplication and to simplify or consolidate text, which we have shared online for members to consider. Although members of Contact Group 2 endorsed our proposed approach to streamlining the text, due to time constraints this week, members did not have the opportunity to formally consider and endorse the streamlined text. As such, the streamlined proposals are presented to the committee as suggestions of the co-facilitators of Contact Group 2 and will be appended to our co-facilitators' report. Chair, I'm very happy to report that as a result of our meetings, Contact Group 2 has accomplished the tasks that were assigned to us. On behalf of my co-facilitator and the supporting team from the INC Secretariat, I would like to thank the delegates who participated in Contact Group 2 for their cooperation, teamwork, and dedication, as well as the constructive spirit with which they worked with us to accomplish our tasks. In the course of our discussions, a number of topics for intersessional work were raised by members, and these were compiled and shared with Contact Group 3 for further elaboration, as requested by the Chair. We have also attached a list of the suggestions to our report. Chair, we look forward to receiving further directives from you and to working with you in the time that is left to complete your work for INC-3. Thank you very much, Chair.
I thank very much the co-facilitators of Contact Group 2, Mr. Boshi, Ms. Lynch, for the report and work. We will now hear a short report from the co-facilitators of Contact Group 3, Ms. Marine Collignon of France and Mr. Dani Rajdiansyah of Indonesia. Ms. Collignon and Mr. Rajdiansyah, you have the floor from the seat of Indonesia.
Thank you very much, Chair. On the elements addressed in the synthesis report, you will recall that on Thursday, we reported that after a first round of discussions on the elements addressed in the synthesis report, the group had entrusted the co-facilitators the task of developing some preliminary language towards the integration of these issues into the draft legal text. On Friday morning, we made available a document intended as a starting point for the integration of these issues into the draft text of the instrument through a combination of some preliminary skeleton draft text language where possible and of options identified at the conceptual level based on our earlier discussions, where it did not seem possible to include draft text at this stage. We heard delegations' initial views on this document on Friday afternoon. Delegations generally welcomed the document, but a number of delegations expressed a preference for us to go further in the incorporation of different elements proposed by members in some parts of the text, including for the preamble. It was therefore agreed that as co-facilitators, we would revise specific aspects of the document, especially the draft preambular language, to try to capture more directly members' inputs. We therefore issued a revised version of this document at midday yesterday, and discussed it in the group in the afternoon and evening yesterday. Thanks to the constructive Nairobi spirit, the group agreed to a revised version of this text last night, and this is reflected in a further revised version of the document, which is to be read together with members' input at INC-3, which are reflected in a compilation. More detail is contained in the written summary, which is posted online earlier today.
Monsieur le Président, on intersessional work, you will recall that we also received a mandate to present recommendation on intersessional work, taking into account the work of the Contract Group 1 and 2 on possible intersessional work in their respective areas. We started this work on Thursday evening with the benefit of the input shared by both Contact Group 1 and Contact Group 2 on possible intersessional work in their respective areas. It is clear that there is much interest in conducting some intersessional work. At the same time, it is clear that we need to be realistic about what can be undertaken between now and INC-4, given both the very short amount of time between INC-3 and INC-4 and the limited resources of the Secretariat. I lost my phrase. Sorry. Our discussions so far have allowed us to confirm members' priorities, and now we need to complete this work and identify some realistic priorities, both in terms of topics to be addressed and the modalities of the proposed work, to develop some proposal for the committee's consideration. We understand that we will be given an opportunity to continue this discussion today. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
I thank the co-facilitators of Contact Group 3, Ms. Collignon and Mr. Rajdiansha, for the report and for their work. Once again, I would like to express my gratitude to the co-facilitators of all the 3 contact groups for their able leadership in facilitating our discussions under this agenda item, and to the members of the committee and the observer for their dedicated work. Having heard the reports of the co-facilitators, I would like to propose a way forward on how we could take our work further today to complete the excellent work that has been done so far. But before that, if there is any requirement for any precision or suggestion, I will open the floor, but I would like to encourage you to be very precise regarding a specific issue of the way forward, because I am going to propose one way right now. So I open the floor right now for short interventions, and then I will propose a way forward. I give the floor to Cuba.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd like to also thank all the co-facilitators for their excellent work. In particular, co-facilitators from Contact Group 1, which we spent most of our time in. And I personally followed lots of discussions there. On the work of Contact Group 1, we welcome the fact that this morning on the website we've already seen most of the revised versions of the draft texts. We're just missing one relating to section 5. We know that hard work has been done. So before leaving today, we'd like to know if we could have that text on section 5 as well. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
I thank Cuba and take note of the request. I also thank the co-facilitators and give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be very brief. I think part of the discussion in the Contact Group 3 within the provision on scope was the part on exemptions, and we have not heard it reflected in the co-facilitators report. Also coming back to the Contact Group 3 on the mergers of the first 2 articles, we also do not see our proposals reflected, and they were submitted and discussed during previous days. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Representative of Russian Federation. We've taken note of your intervention. I give now the floor to the representative of St. Lucia.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, it was an accident.
Thank you very much. There is no more requests for the floor, so I have the request from Iran. I give the floor to Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. On behalf of my delegation, I also wish to extend our appreciation to the esteemed co-facilitators for their great job, which they have done so far. And of course, we do understand that still there are a number of small issues pending and needs, the flexibility of all colleagues in the room. And my delegation wish to advise that we focus on the common grounds instead of on the disputed areas. So in the short time left before the ending of this INC-3, we can conclude our discussions in a very positive manner. And looking at the contact groups reports uploaded in the website, we understood that for one of the options, still the document which has been uploaded is the older ones, in spite of the date of the report, which has been uploaded, is for 19th November, but the report is the old one belonging, I think, to 17th. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iran, for your intervention. We've taken note of your intervention. I give now the floor to representative of China, followed by Uruguay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Towards co-facilitator and secretariat, we extend our warmest gratitude. In the interest of time, China is still studying all the documents because of limited time. Now we'd like to give you our feedback. About Contact Group 1's report, we think in transition, in justice or transition, there are two things. First of all, developed countries need to support developing countries. This is crucial in achieving a just transition. The second one is about domestic policies. We think the text needs to be streamlined so that we can respect the country's sovereignty. About Contact Group second, the financial mechanism and sources of finance, China suggests that the source should include government, private sectors, financial sectors, etc. China supports the statement. At the same time, we believe that the document should clarify to point out the technology, finance, and capacity building support. We also have to emphasize the public funds plays a leveraging role on treating plastic waste. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chana. We and the co-facilitator taken note of your intervention. Ahora le doy la palabra a...
I now give the floor to the representative of Uruguay. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm making the statement on behalf of GRULAC.
Referring to Contact Group 2, Way Forward. The GRULAC position is that the basis of our understanding is that there is an agreement that the CC2 work is done. We will encourage not to reopen the discussions of the CC2. If a group of countries consider that something is missing from what was expressed in CC2 or in their submissions in the text, they can send it to the Secretariat and it will be announced in the next hours. If we all agree, this proposed text can be incorporated in the CC2 final outcome dated 18 November without disrupting the existing text. Nevertheless, if the CC2 considers necessary to validate the final outcome text proposed by the co-facilitators, GRULAC will not oppose. Thank you.
Agradezco mucho a la representante de Uruguay.
I thank the representative of Uruguay, speaking on behalf of GRULAC.
I now give the floor to representative of Thailand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, all distinguished colleagues. Sawadee ka. As our colleagues are very grateful congratulations from our delegations go to all co-facilitators for your hard efforts and dedication with a very tremendous work to be a very good basis groundwork of its next session. Our deeply gratitude is also extended to the strong INC Secretariat team and all backups for their tireless support throughout this stressful but hopefully joyful week for everyone, including us. Our delegation stand ready in engaging for discussing the remaining issue with a view to conclude our work meaningful and efficient for the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Representative of Thailand. I give now the floor to Representative of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to extend my appreciation to the co-facilitators in group number 3 for their support and continuous work to reach a consensus and ending up with something that we can carry on into INC-4. And I would like to ask a question on what's the way forward in group number 3, what we're going to be discussing this afternoon, and what sort of output that would be in a place. Thank you.
I thank Representative of Saudi Arabia. Precisely after these interventions, I will present my proposal for a way forward. I now will give the floor to Representative of Kenya, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on Contact Group 3, the document that we have downloaded is the one written 18th November 2023 at 12:30, and our input on the Secretariat is not included. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the representative of Kenya. I give now the floor to the representative of the European Union.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and allow me also to join the voices of great appreciation of the hard work by the co-facilitators, and appreciate the great progress and the results that they are obviously honored to report to this meeting. I would just like to express the support of the European Union to the statement of GRULAC as regards the recognition that the work in the Contact Group 2 has been done and all the substantive work has been done, and all the views have been well included in the compilation. However, we also see a great value in the validation of the streamlining exercise by the co-facilitators, and we would like to request that the Contact Group 2 is given the opportunity to continue with the validation so that we have the revised zero draft validated by members of the INC. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the European Union. I see no more requests. So, distinguished delegates, based on what we have heard from the co-facilitators, it appears that Contact Group 2 would require additional time to validate the text they have proposed as co-facilitators in the group. I further note that Contact Group 3 is in a good position to finalize its recommendation for possible intersessional work. I would also like to invite this contact group to address the status of the final revised version of the zero draft once the work of the Contact Group 2 has concluded. I would therefore propose that we suspend this plenary to reconvene the discussions in Contact Group 2 and 3. I invite Contact Group 2 to limit their deliberations to 1 hour to ensure that their outcomes can be fully taken into account in Contact Group 3. I expect that Contact Group 2 and 3 will meet no later than in an hour in order that all delegations can have sufficient time to review the documents. We would then reconvene the plenary, hopefully at 4 p.m. to resume our consideration of Agenda Item 4. I see request of the floor from Brazil. Brasil tiene la palabra.
Thank you very much, and good morning, almost good afternoon, Mr. Chair. It's always a pleasure to see you here. We just want to point out that in one of the merger options, for the sake of consistency, we had a pair of brackets on one issue that should be repeated in another paragraph that repeats the same issue. We will send this by email to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Duly noted. So, I see no objections, so it will be decided. We'll go this way. I think the Secretariat would like to provide additional information. I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to inform delegates that the Contact Group 2 will convene from 1:30 p.m. in Conference Room 1. Contact Group 3 will convene from 1:30 p.m. in Conference Room 2. Delegates are kindly invited to check the schedule for latest information. We would also like to remind delegates to please not leave your belongings unattended in the conference rooms and refrain from reserving seats, as UN security may remove your belongings. Delegates are kindly requested to visit the Lost and Found counter located at the security desk in the main lobby. A number of items have been stored at that counter for pickup. Thank you.
Sorry, I need to clarify a bit. Contact Group 3 will go to the other room, is room number 1. And Contact Group 2 will remain in this room. That's the precision. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.